And hello, hello, hello to all of my listeners. I would like to welcome you all to the 10th episode of Jeremy Speaks on Everything. Thank you to all my listeners. I would like to thank everybody who's supporting me on this journey that I'm taking. And I'm celebrating the 10th episode of Jeremy Speaks on Everything because I generally don't see things through to their completion. Well, I'm 20% through my goal for the year, which is 50 episodes, and I'm a little proud of that. I'm a little proud of that. If you'd have a question, would you like to comment, criticize a viewpoint, or do you like the content within, or do you not like the content within? By all means, call us at 347-994-3320, and let's speak on it. And speaking of speaking, I would like to encourage males of African origins. I've been catching myself lately when I'm editing. I would like to encourage males of African origins to speak to each other daily. Let's conversate. Let's talk to each other. Let's learn from each other. Let's inform and protect each other because nobody else out here is. Like, comment, criticize. Comment, please. Subscribe and follow. It is all welcome. Now, last Thursday's show, I had my brother on. That was Call In Thursday. Seemed to be a theme where people just call in on Thursdays. Last Thursday, we had a show where he was giving me his opinion on the justice system and how it's not equal for anyone. But I posted it to my YouTube channel, the Negro Sports League. Go check it out. It's a really, really good talk. And I learned a couple of things about my brother I didn't know. I didn't know his viewpoint was as jaded or more jaded than mine, considering I've never worked in a county jail before. But that is on my YouTube channel, the Negro Sports League. Also, I did mention this yesterday. I do have something working with a Teespring store where I'm going to be hopefully mass producing large amounts of T-shirts, larger than what I can produce here on my own. So I'm going to be elaborating more on that tomorrow. Or no, not tomorrow. I'm going to be elaborating more on that Thursday. Trying to get a caller line up, but I'll see how that goes. Follow my social media, YouTube, Facebook, the usual. And I stated, I don't think I went into detail about what I was going to talk about. I wanted to think about the topic a little bit because when I pick topics, I often would like to research them before I get on the radio with it. And I was just thinking last night after the radio show, what is it? Well, not yesterday. I'm going to say last week sometime, Friday. I was thinking Friday about what can I talk about? And, of course, this channel deals with the issue of the myth of, I'm going to start calling it a myth. It's not an issue. It's a myth. I wanted to talk about something that dealt with the myth of race. So, of course, I got on my Google and my interweb and my Wikipedia and a couple of books, and I came up with something. I wanted to figure out where did this legal discrimination start? And my research and my questioning brought me to a particular place, and it brought me to the Spanish Inquisition. Now, I know a lot of people may not be familiar with the Spanish Inquisition. It's the first time that someone actually wrote down laws making it legal to discriminate against people based on a bunch of different things. It could be, before that, it was all just political stuff. You were discriminated against based on class and things like that, but never really, the issue of race has been around. It's been a topic probably since people, But I don't think that the word race was adopted by Americans or Europeans coming to America. It was adopted to keep going what had happened already in Spain. Now, it helped shape the European understanding of human differences. That's what the Spanish Inquisition has served to do to this day because the myth of race is still prevalent. Race is based on biological distinction, and it's a social and a historical construction, in my opinion, for profit, with it's based on biological basis, like what people look like, what people. That's a construct made up by somebody. The idea of race as a classification system has been around since ancient times. And, 9 scientists back, this is just an American part of it, but 9 scientists used to measure skulls and measure human athletic or human abilities to differentiate between people. They would use brilliant people to keep that myth going. Anyway, that all had to start somewhere. So in 1449, in Spain, an edict made racial discrimination legal. And it made miscegenation. Now I'm gonna have to work on the miscegenation. I'm gonna have to work on my pronunciation of that word, but it's miscegenation. That's the mixing of people, white, black, as we call it today, white, black people, or just mixing of races. That's what that is. It made the mixing of blood something that was, you could discriminate on somebody based on that. That was, they even had a set of racial exclusion laws. It was the first example of legalized racism. That's what a guy named Leon Polyakov, he was an anti-Semitism expert. He said he did his research on it, and it was the introduction of the first example in history of legalized racism. They called Jews, they called it the perverse lineage of Jews that they were trying to cleanse. And, and during my research, I want to point this out. Jews and Moors were looked down upon. And I can only think of one reason why. Because if you look at history books and pictures now of Moors, they are a dark-skinned people. And, it's just in my opinion, it could... My opinion, and $1.29 will get you a cup of coffee somewhere, I'm sure. But, if you discriminate on the Moors because they're dark, what could that possibly tell us about Jews? Anyway, I'm getting off subject here. I'm getting off subject there a little bit, It was 1449. This thing really, truly became like a real thing that you could discriminate against people. And it's been over 500 years, and these effects are still felt today. Like, according to historians, this guy named David Breon Davis, there was a Spanish categorization and treatment of Jews provided. And in that treatment, it provided the final seedbed for Christian negrophobic racism and gave rise to more general concern over purity of race, which we'll get to that in a moment, and thus an early conception of biological race. Now, the treatment of Jews, it's one phrase that I wrote down right here. The Spanish categorization and treatment of Jews provided the seedbed for Christian negrophobic racism. That says a lot. Now, this is all cited from online sources. I didn't make any of this stuff up. I just researched it and put it in my own words. But it has to lend some credence. I think it's called limpieza de sangre, Spanish. I do know a little bit. That's what that translates to, Christian negrophobic racism. That's basically saying Christians who are phobic to Negroes can be racist against them. Now, the limpieza de sangre is something that referred to people who were considered old Christians without Muslim or Jewish ancestors. Now, during the course of my research, I kept seeing Muslim and Jewish or Moor and Jewish just pop up, And I'm not saying that all Muslims back then were dark-skinned people, but I am definitely saying that the Moors were. And this phrase I read, Christian negrophobic racism, Anyway, literally that phrase in Spanish that I keep butchering means the cleanliness of blood and blood purity. That's what we're kind of, like it's a debate going on out here in the world about supremacy of a certain race, quote unquote, and it seems like these roots are based in this phrase, the purity of blood. You know, like they even had a test where they would judge the purity of blood, and it is as ridiculous as it sounds. It really is. You know, a guy would put his right hand over an image of a crucifix on the Bible, right? And the candidate confirmed themselves as being either Jewish, not Jewish, or Moorish. Then the candidate, the guy who had his hand on the Bible, he provided the names of his parents and grandparents as well as places of birth. And two people in the church or the public place or the council, they would research the information to make sure it was truthful. You know, if they keep records like that to make sure, I mean, at the time, I guess they were trying to, you know, keep out certain, you know, you got to prove that you don't have this blood in your body, which, come on, let's be honest, that's as stupid as it sounds. But people believe this and have believed this for 500 years now. That's why you see certain races assimilating. You know, Italians got here, they were dark, so they had to assimilate so that their kids wouldn't go through it. So let's keep it real now. A simple majority was sufficient after the candidate had promised to obey all the laws and customs of the church. See, the church ran things back then, as you can clearly see. The church it's kind of like the Inquisition was trying to convert people to a certain thing, and they used everything that they could to get it there, including race. You know? And is that fair? Hell no, it's not fair. It's not. I mean, race and subsequent racism was created by white Europeans and Americans to justify the enslavement of millions of people for profit. This country has always been run on profit, or it's a profit-based business. This is a corporation. We are a corporation. It's a club, and we ain't invited to it, and we never have been. Anyway, as in order to justify stealing shit from people, you know, they would form inquisitions to punish people. They would lie and say they were still practicing their Jewish faith. You know, and then on June 5th, 1449, this guy, I think his name is Sarmiento, he issued the Sentencia Estuado. It was the first set of racial exclusion laws in modern history. It barred certain people, I think it's called conversos, regardless of what their devout or not devout, regardless of what their religion was. It would bar them from holding private or public office or receiving land from the church unless they could prove 4 generations of Christian affiliation. Now think about that, right? Let's just take a little bit of that phrase. They used exclusion laws that would bar people from holding private or public office or receiving land from the church unless they could prove that they had a Christian affiliation. It introduced race. It called the Jews' lineage perverse and called the same harms and evils and wars which Jews, who were, quote unquote, the enemy of the Holy Catholic faith, you know, it will prevent that. You know, like they even went so far, like in 1537, they would bar people from universities based on that. That was in the 1500s. Yet we can fast forward to a time period in this American history where they would do the same thing. See, in my research, I came to the conclusion on my own that these laws are rooted in these laws. Like this is learned behavior. You know, the purity of blood. That's what they all say now. Like when they want to, the pure this race or the pure that. It's a construct, and people buy into this construct. People put energy into this construct to keep oppressing people that they don't see as pure. You know, that is a terrible. And through the course of researching the Spanish Inquisition, I found that this was real. Like people actually bought into this. You know, by the 1440s, Spain had entered the slave trade. Spain and Portugal had entered the African slave trade. I mean, let me clear that up. And it was dominated formerly by Islamic countries, And when they discovered America, quote unquote, even though technically you can't discover a place where people are already living. Let's be honest. You can't discover a place where people are already living. But when Columbus came over here, Spain, they had the limpieza. They had that that was law. That was the law based on it, discriminating against people, right? So when they brought slaves here from Spain or brought people here from Spain, they brought that with them. It in this environment, it began to mutate. And, we can discriminate. That kind of, and I can see where, I don't agree with, first of all, but I can see where people would get this whole, well, they're inferior to me, therefore, because they're not white blood. I see where that idea can come from. I see, you see similarities between then and now, but that's one thing that hasn't changed. The thought that because of your blood, the thought that your blood is impure, it could taint your character. It's kind of how people look at me when they see me or see people that look like me. They compared they had a guy, 1604. It was a guy. I'm not gonna. We'll just call him Frey because his first name is Frey, right? He compared the impure nature of blacks and Jews, and it said, "This is a quote from him. Who can deny that in their descendants?" Let me start that over. This quote from Frey starts, quote, "Who can deny that in the descendants of Jews there persists and endures the evil inclination of their ancient ingratitude and lack of understanding, just as in the Negroes there persists the inseparability of their blackness? For if the latter should unite themselves 1,000 times with white women, the children are born with the dark color of their father. Similarly, it is not enough for the Jew to be 3 parts aristocrat or old Christian, for one Jewish ancestor alone defiles and corruption." Wow. That is saying a lot. You couldn't even go back 4 generations and have somebody in your family that was what they consider impure. It's crazy, right? The main target of this in the Americas anyway was males of African, males and females and children and boys, of African descent. It was used to discriminate against them, as I stated earlier, to justify race slavery and enforce distinctions that a race slave system required. Royal people with money, people in positions of power said, and check this out now, because it sounds similar. They could deny you entrance. This was in the 1600s. They could deny you entrance into an institute of higher learning because they deemed your blood impure by a standard made up in the 1400s. How archaic of people are we? Well, we're still, what is this? This isn't medieval times. Granted, males of African origin in this country have only been free for a few, 152 years? Hell, we was enslaved longer than that. Anyway, I regress a little. And just to go and show you just how I don't know what the word is, how slick this stuff is. The vocabulary that the English colonies adopted for race had roots in Spanish colonies. Negro came into the English from Spanish in the mid-16th century, and mulatto a half century later. Now, for those who don't know what a mulatto is someone who is of mixed blood. That's incredible. That they took words from this, I get it. It went viral, so to speak. We'll just say that for the 1500s and 1600s, this trend caught on and it went viral and it didn't leave. Now, all these other trends I see online, they fade away, like people kicking this bottle cap off and all of these goofy-ass trends that they have online. But this one trend of discriminating against people based on a biological basis, one trend is stuck for 500 years. As a matter of fact, I'll say 500 and almost 600 years, actually. Almost 600 years we've believed in this stupid shit. People, even myself, I was indoctrinated with this way of thinking about myself. Anyway, even the word race comes from Spain, where it was used to refer to people of Jewish descent. Now, I'm not the brightest light bulb in my room. I'm not the brightest star in the sky. I'm not. But the more I read about Jews being discriminated against in the groups that they were discriminated against, you know, the people that were discriminated, like the Moors and a couple other groups, all of these people had darker skin. So, you know, that may lend itself. That's some food for thought for you right there. There's a book called Race in America, and it's a quote in it that says, in fact, race did not appear in the English language until the 17th century with reference to human groups. It is quite likely that the English adopted the term race from the Spanish. Even though I will say it wasn't until the 18th century that the English colonists used blood as in a racial content. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't up until that point. You know, even Thomas Jefferson expressed similar concerns about race mixing. He said that blacks, he called them blacks, that blacks should be removed beyond the reach of mixture so that they could not stain the blood of their masters. It was born 3 centuries before Thomas Jefferson said that. 3 centuries. And it is embedded in the consciousness of America today. That is some real, and here's my curse word for that, some messed up shit. I don't want to live in the world, you know, like I don't want to live in a world where I'm considered inferior or impure based on something that was written 600 years ago. Hell, 600 years ago, people were chopping off motherfuckers' heads in the courtyard. You know, should we go back to doing that shit? I mean, I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, sometimes leaving the past where it's at, like, you know how America likes to try to move past this thing called racism, but without acknowledging it, we just want to go straight to fixing it. No, we can't do that. We have to acknowledge it, acknowledge that wrong was done, and we have to move on. The Moor and the Jew. If you don't take away anything else away from that, you should at least get curious about it, because the Moors came. I read something I researched about the Moors not too long ago, where the Moors came and brought languages and had universities and brought research. You know, they had 500 universities at one point in time with just the Moors coming up with, and they were dark-skinned Spanish-speaking people. You know, Jews, Arabs, during the Inquisition, Jews, Arabs, and Berbers, which I don't know what that is, but were targeted the most. So, in the traditional sense of how we think now, Arabs are fairly dark-skinned people, you know? So, it leads one to think that maybe Jews were a little dark-skinned. I don't know. I'm just reading it as it's given to me as the information comes into my face. I don't, you know, I like to read something. This is what people think. This is what I was taught that Africa was. And I'm just throwing it out there because it has ties to the Spanish Inquisition. A land where complex civilizations had existed for centuries was reduced to the dark continent and its people declared savages. The history of Africa was rewritten to make whites the conquerors who civilized the natives. It tells you something. Even the ideology of racial dictatorship and hierarchy took root in American society by the signing of the famous document, the United States Constitution. Now, a couple of weeks ago on my radio show, I said if the roots of the tree are fucked up, then the tree's fucked up. That's true. So these ideas and impure thoughts about people who are mixed race or people with quote unquote black blood, it was signed when it was signed into the United States Constitution, because the document clearly says we the people of the United States. It wasn't the enslaved Africans, because they were considered 3/5 of a human being. Why? Because of the black quote unquote blood in their bodies. Considered inferior, impure beast by some guy who wrote something in Spain because he wanted to steal people's money. That lends itself to the credence that racism is a for-profit business. That's all it is. It's a myth that people get paid off of it to keep others divided so that they themselves, the ones that starting the fight, can keep all the stuff at the top. I'll give you an example. Many people know that I'm a wrestling fan, right? Okay, there are these matches that are called triple threat matches. And most of the time in a triple threat matches is 2 good guys or faces and 1 bad guy, right? The bad guy is going to do what he can to get the 2 good guys to fight each other, right? And these 2 good guys are going to fight each other because they're there to win. They're competitors. That's what they're there to do. They're there to win and beat each other. But once they start hitting each other and knocking each other down, that's when the bad guy comes in and picks the bones and then gets back out real quick. And then the bad guy will wait till one of the guys has the upper hand again, and he'll run back in there and he'll try to pick the bones and he'll run back out. The trick is with doing things that way, eventually the bad guy gets caught and he gets what's coming to him. These archaic ways of thinking and this destructive way of judging people based on a biological basis of something they can't control is rooted in greed. Because the king wanted to extort someone and get what he could get from them. Therefore, law. I'm glad I looked up the Spanish Inquisition. It gave me a little bit more insight about this monster that I have to deal with. This monster and this issue of me being judged before people even know me. Now I see why. I don't see why. They had an arrival of scientific racism at one point in time, and it was European in the 19th and 20th century. They tried to affirm the inherent biological determinism of moral and intellectual capabilities of an individual and the division of groups or humans into races differentiated by physical traits associated to immutable, inherited moral and intellectual traits, which is basically a nice way or a wordy way of saying you may be considered inferior based on the fact that you look like other people. And I'm gonna tap on that because, ladies and gentlemen, that is this week's show. I would like to thank you for listening. I would like to thank you for supporting. By all means, go check out my channel. Go check out my channel on YouTube, the Negro Sports League. This episode will be uploaded there, and check out a few of my other ones. I would like to thank you all for tuning in today. Catch me tomorrow. Be sure to call in 347-994-3320. Be sure to call in Thursday if you want to talk. I've been Jeremy Speaks. Peace.